Hey guys, we're going to be looking at a match between OTB, Red Baron, and Wookiees, and we're going to look in chronological order. This is not a YouTube video where we are simply going to look at the highlights, but really when you look at sports, the best look at the details, the best look at every single action, and they're not just trying to chase dopamine, but they're actually trying to understand how the game works. And heads up is the ultimate form of poker. So we're going to take a look at each hand that's going on. There's 2,000 something hands. We'll probably only get through like 5 or 15 or 20 or something, but let's take a look at some hands and let's see what happens. This is the beginning of their match. And Jungleman, OTB, Red Baron, very strong players. Wookiee selects to go with the limp pre-flop and OTB raises. Wookiees fold. So maybe there's a little bit less tricky stuff going on in the limping range, and maybe it was just convenient. Maybe he thought that his opponent wasn't going to find enough raises. We don't really know, but we see that. OTB likes to go with the fold. Wookiees. Did I misunderstand something? What happened here? How was it 2 hands in a row? Maybe they were playing on 2 tables. Anyways, so OTB goes with the RFI, Wookiees goes with the 3-bet, and Mr. Baron calls. Now the board is Ace, Queen, 7, very strong board for out of position. Remember, a lot of the Ace King, a lot of the Ace Queen, Ace Jack gets 3-bet here. In addition to that, he'll have stuff like Queens, Aces, Kings, Jacks, 10s, strong Queen X like King, Queen, Queen Jack, Queen 10, etc. So he goes with the half pot continuation bet. A lot of the Queen X is not going to like this sizing. OTB goes with the fold. Interesting spot. Now, Wookiees RFI go with the call. Wookiees kind of large bet on the flop. And OTB goes with a relatively small check raise. And in this situation, OTB is kind of saying, hey, I have something like 3s. I have something like deuces. I have something like Ace 10, King 10, Queen 10, Jack 10, maybe something like Ace 5, some sort of straight draw, some sort of flush draw. But if you really think about this range, heads-up ranges are so wide that actually there's not very many strong hands here, because 10-2 suited, 10-3 suited are not too many, and he's not going to be calling the offsuit variety. So really OTB is basically saying I have a 10. Most of his range is saying he has a 10. And Mr. Jungleman goes with the call against the check raise. Remember that OTB is not really representing very much in this spot, and it's also quite capped. He elects to go with the turn check. Now that makes sense. The story kind of makes sense, right? He's saying I had a 10, a king comes, goes with the check. Now Mr. Jungle goes with a half pot bet. OTB goes with the fold. Yeah, so we're on to the next hand again. Jungleman go with the RFI, goes check check on the Jack 9-8. Again, going check check on the 10 turn, and river the ace. And he wins with the Jack. It would be interesting to know what Jungle had. Maybe he had something like 7s to deuces, king high, maybe a 9, maybe an 8, something like that. And OTB goes with the limp and checks back. OTB will have a lot of 8x when he goes with the check back. Jungle doesn't go with the turn probe. Jungle goes quite large here. He's essentially saying, hey, I have pretty much a jack that didn't probe the turn because you were so 8x heavy, or maybe I have an 8 myself. And he's also able to bluff here. He can essentially go with the bluff and challenge OTB to actually find enough calls here. And OTB goes with the fold, so he doesn't find a hero call. And in this spot, it's very likely that OTB has some sort of showdown value. He can also arrive here with air and then try to overbluff this node, but yeah, he didn't go with the bluff catch. OTB goes with another limp. Now he goes roughly pot on this texture. Yeah, it's fine. And again, turn, it's fine. He'll have like less 2 pairs on the 3, whereas Jungleman will have a lot of stuff flying 9-3, 6-3. 5-3, and OTB really doesn't have that many like aces, kings, queens, jacks, 10s that are going to be limping, relatively speaking, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, he can still go big because he has a lot of strong 9x, some overpairs. He still can have like 2 pair straights, etc. Just, not like so many of them. And he had the jack 4, and he didn't value bet the river. So when he doesn't value bet the river, he's saying that he doesn't think the EV of betting compared to checking is there, or he thinks that if he's value betting too thin, then maybe his opponent will make an adjustment, and even if he makes a little bit more EV this time, overall it's not good for him. But there's just not that many hands that actually Jungleman is having that beat OTB's River Jack X. That's extremely surprising in this limp pot. And also Jungleman fast plays a lot of hands that he probably should just call. I know that maybe at this point OTB doesn't really know Jungleman that well, because Jungleman hasn't really played online that many years when he was playing these hands, and I'm just pretty surprised that OTB doesn't value bet a jack on the river, because when he goes, basically pot on flop, overbet on turn, what is actually beating him? Not that many hands. Genuinely not that many hands. And Jungleman might start raising something like 9-6, 9-5, 6-5 on the flop, which, yes, you could say it's aggressive, but anyways, it's not really a big deal, but this is telling you a lot. This is actually an extremely important hand. It might look like a small pot, but you get a feeling for how someone thinks about the game, and that's through how thin they value it, how aggressively they bluff, etc. And knowing what they're comfortable with value betting, it gives you an idea as to their perception of you. Are they not value betting because they're uncomfortable? Are they not value betting because they think that you're not going to call? Are they not value betting because they think you're going to raise? Like, what is their logic? Everything is about trying to understand your opponent's logic, and this is extremely important hand in this situation. We're going to move on and take a look at some more stuff. So single raise pot. Goes check, check, turn king, pretty strong card for OTB. He goes with the 2/3 in terms of his bluffing region. Oh, and he gets check raised. And Jungleman is basically saying, hey, I had like a random ace and I thought you were going to just value bet your, king 6 on the river, and I'm just going with raise. And then OTB is going to be in this spot where he has to figure out, well, do I think you had enough of those, or do I think you're just finding a bunch of bluffs or like random bullshit because you think I'm going to fold too much king X? And then sort of OTB needs to figure out, well, do I think my opponent's value bidding enough, or do I think he has enough bluffs? Because he sure as hell has a shit ton of ace X for value. And imagine if you're Jungleman on the river and you have an ace. Would you really bet? Do you think that your opponent is going to call with a lot of like queen high, jack high? Well, maybe, and he should theoretically make your bluffs indifferent, but the issue is that maybe OTB says, hey, it looks like I have a lot of king X here, and it looks like I'm going to call. Is my opponent going to bluff me if it looks like I'm going to call? And then Jungle might reason, hey, it looks like he's going to call, so he's not going to call, so therefore it's better for me to check. And you can, look at this logic, and then you can say, well, then, he's going to have a ton of ace X. And then if he's going to have a ton of ace X, is he going to just like bluff a bunch of random bullshit? Well, he might, because it might look like, hey, OTB knows that he has a bunch of king X, and it would be easy for him to slow play an ace. But at the same time, it looks like he has a lot of king X, and he might just be like, fuck you, I'm going to call. You don't know. But looking at whether OTB calls or folds will give you insight into how he likely thinks. So he does fold. Now, it doesn't mean that he had a king and he folded. He could have just had something like jack 2 of spades. But it's more likely that he's finding a fold here. And some people will give you a big fuck you and call at the beginning of a match and kind of tell you how they think about the game. OTB was a little bit more structurally sound. He was a little bit more strategical, a little bit, even you could say tactical in terms of hands. And yeah, anyways, we'll see more hands. OTB 3-bets, Jungle goes with the fold, another limped situation. When OTB goes with the delay, it's very interesting. Extremely interesting, because essentially what he's saying is he has a sort of ace high that he's value betting, and he's trying to put money in versus jungles like king high, queen high region. OTB is very unlikely to be putting this bet sizing in with a hand like queen high or king high, because essentially he's going to be folding the weaker hands, but then the better hands are going to be continuing. Not that there are like tons of better hands, but he's not repping a whole lot, but he can also go pretty thin here. And also, maybe a lot of his air would bet a flop, blah, blah, blah. But basically my main question here is, how much air does he put in the delay line on the 4-4 deuce? Does he think that Jungle's going to just try to go crazy and bluff him on the flop, or what does this delay consist of? It's just interesting to think about how he organizes his range in different spots. So OTB calls the RFI out of position, and the flop goes check, check, and he goes with the turn probe. Now, when you think about this turn probing range here, there are an absolute shit ton of flush draws, the clubs and the hearts for OTB. In addition to that, there are a lot of straight draws, an incredible amount of straight draws. If you think about something like 5-3, 6-3, if you think about something like 8-5, if you think about something like 5-6, ace-5, ace-3, there's so many draws here. And actually, OTB Red Baron is very unlikely to be betting something like 10-7 of spades on the turn. So if Jungle's thinking about this, it's quite likely that he expects OTB to be over bluffing, but then maybe OTB is just going thin here. Maybe he's actually, being tricky and, doing a lot. We're just playing well globally and just not overdoing it. You don't know, but it's very easy to see OTB bet turn and then over give up river. And also at this point, there's not like a ton of King X that gets into this line for Jungleman. He's often going to have a lot of ace high. And weaker pairs, there's going to be, he can have something like ace king, maybe king jack calls the turn, just, finding enough hands. But yeah, and OTB goes very thin on the turn with pocket sixes, which in my opinion is extremely thin. That's a very, very, very important data point here, right? So if you're Jungleman and you see that your opponent is going extremely thin on the turn, globally, he's putting in too much money, first of all. So you could play a lot of delay lines with your air, and when your opponent checks twice, you can bluff it very aggressively. Also, you can play a lot of delay lines with your top pairs, with your medium pairs. And now at this point, when your opponent is probing, you actually aren't bluff catching with really weak stuff. You actually are bluff catching with pretty strong hands. So your opponent isn't even getting that much value. And you're also mostly just folding air, right? To make his bluffs indifferent, you didn't have to continue that many hands. And also, if OTB's going too thin here, he might be a little bit too value heavy, but in this spot, it's very unlikely still that he's too value heavy. It's likely that he's just globally putting way too much money in the pot. But when you see a hand like this, you can get the idea that OTB Red Baron is thinking about denial of equity and his perceived range, and he's going to put in too much money, especially in this situation where maybe there are low cards that would need to deny equity, like a 7 or 4. Maybe OTB thinks that Jungleman will be betting more of the 8s to the checks. Maybe he thinks that 7x will bet. Maybe he just thinks, fuck it, I'm going to probe because I just want to deny equity. Whatever the case is, but the point is that he's putting in too much money. And you can very easily counter this by just globally checking more as the in-position player. And he will counter himself, actually. He's kind of exploiting himself if you're playing somewhat reasonably. And so we'll see if Jungle sees this hand and starts playing more check. We'll kind of see how he's approaching it here. He gets 3-bet, goes with the fold. There are HUDs over here. You can kind of see the statistics thus far, but obviously it doesn't really matter. You just need to look at the logic of hands. And maybe over like hundreds or thousands of hands, the HUDs will start to matter. But I don't know. I don't really use HUDs, to be honest, but I think they're probably useful. I just am a little bit lazy. Interesting. So technically, if Jungleman thinks that OTB Red Baron is... there's no technically, right? That's whole bullshit. But this deuce X that Jungle Rivers actually could value bet. And it's very possible that OTB gets the river way too king high heavy, way too ace high heavy, and simply just doesn't put very much money in. But also if Jungleman is betting too thin on the river, like betting all of his deuce X, betting all of his 4x, etc., then when he checks, his strategy will be quite wide open. And OTB can start shifting a lot of hands into the delay lines and try to basically manufacture EV versus Jungle. So, anyways, it doesn't really matter, but you can see that Jungle is not electing to go for the very thin value bet on the river. Very important piece of information. Extremely important piece of information, actually. We're going to do a few more hands from this, and we might continue. I don't really know. I kind of want to get information and see if people actually like this content. But yes, so OTB goes with the stab in the limped pot. It's interesting because OTB Red Baron was using some pot-sized stabs earlier. I know the board texture was slightly different, but technically he has a much larger advantage in this situation. But he can also just play a sort of tax to jungle's range as well and go small. It's absolutely a fine strategy. Goes for the turn check. Jungle wins with his King 7. Very nice. So he's he's betting his air on the flop and then giving up. Or maybe he had some like weaker hand as well. We don't know what OTB had, but still, you want to just see these kind of spots. So he's going with the check raise on the flop. Gets it through. Jungle ISOs his limp. Pretty small isolation for what it's worth. OTB goes with a raise. When he limp calls, you see there's not really hands like Jack 6 and Jack 4 and 6-4 offsuit for the limp caller here when it's like 3.5x. So it's interesting to say the least, finding like many raises. So obviously you should be finding raises, and you can do this, but then also you want to be aware as Jungleman that, you know, playing an aggressive 3-bet here, especially if the raise goes in, but then on turns and rivers he's not putting in enough money, or he is putting in too much money or whatever. This is going to affect how Jungle really wants to play against this raise, because it's not really just like the raise, but then you also need to think about how this note is going to play out compared to when you bet any calls, and also when you bet and then he raises. If you re-raise compared to if you call, how are the turns and the rivers going to play in terms of how much money OTB puts in with a hand like Queen Jack? If he raises, is he going to check the turn with Queen Jack? But if you put in a 3-bet on the flop to like $2,000 because you know, hey, motherfucker, you're probably not going to have many 2 pairs here. You're full of shit. And you probably raise Ace Jack, King Jack a lot. So what the fuck are you representing? And you kind of just go massive because you're like, hey, in order to make my bluffs indifferent, you're going to just have to call a shit ton here, right? Well, yeah, that puts OTB in a bad spot. And it's probably a lot worse of a spot than if he just goes call and like plays chill. But we don't really know what's going on. So we're just going to see. Jungle does go with the fold, but interesting situation. So OTB goes with a limp again, and he goes with a call. Now he's going quite large on the 10-9-5. So he's using different pre-flop raise sizings as well. So some things you could say is like he might be going medium or smaller when he's racing with a more capped range. He also could just be doing something tricky and going like, 3.5x with a stronger hand, 4x with a weaker hand or more vulnerable hand, like whatever. There could be a lot of stuff going on. We don't really know. But he's also going quite large on this texture. We don't know how Broadway heavy OTB could be. We don't know how many, offsuit connectors he would be calling. But if I'm Wookiees and I had a very strong hand, I might elect to go quite large here. And there's a lot of possible hands. He can also just have bluffs, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But you just want to be aware of these little details in terms of race sizings and all this kind of stuff. We're going to wrap it up pretty soon. Now OTB goes with RFI. Gets the fold again, limps. Now OTB goes with a delay for 2/3. And you wonder if OTB would be doing a delay here with something like King 9 ever, Queen 9, Jack 9. We do see that he has the ability to go somewhat thin on turn to check river, but that was out of position. We don't have that much information on OTB, but there's a decent amount of 10x that can check back as well. The 10 gets devalued a lot when you end up betting flop, and then, a bad card comes to check on the turn, blah, blah, blah. It's fine, but he could actually be like checking, like flush draws, 2 pairs straights on the flop. Like, to be honest, it's not like he's that capped, but Yeah, basically the question is how thin is he going? That's like really what's going on. Like how thin is OTB actually going compared to bluffs? And there are natural bluffs, a lot of them, but and it goes check on the river. So Wookiees raised 4x with pocket fives, but then he also used some smaller isolation sizes before. You want to keep that in mind. You want to try to understand the logic of Jungleman. Like, why is he going to 4x preflop? What is he going to do when he goes to 3.5x or 5x or whatever the case is? These are the small details you need to identify. OTB checking flop with two pair, it's fine because basically this board is so dynamic and like it's fine. It's not really a big deal. You could read way more into it and be like, oh, he's slow playing a lot, but really the value of this hand is not that high. And yeah, he doesn't need to like value bet it on the river. But I mean, a lot of the 8x in Jungle's position, or a lot of the Jack X as well in Jungle's position, would have probably bet himself on flop return. But also he can check call, you know. But then you wonder, is Jungle really going to be raising like King 8 offsuit or King 8 suited or like Ace 8? Like, is that really what he's ISOing? So then what the fuck does he have? And then I might argue like, hey, fucking value bet your 10-9. Motherfucker, value bet your 10-9. But then also maybe that's not good. I mean, I'm not OTB Red Baron, obviously. I'm not very good. So, but I'm just saying, like, I might just want to go a little bit crazy. But then you're also just blocking the hands that would call you and blah, blah, blah. And then if you're going too thin here, then maybe Jungle is just starting to go crazy against you if you see it, if he sees it. And, you know, there's lots of kind of stuff that can happen. But I still just want to be like, screw you. Take me on, son. I'm not afraid of you, but I'm probably not a very good heads-up player. I'm probably just like an egotistical idiot. But I think it's more fun to be an egotistical idiot, like genuinely. Like I think it's more fun. I do think winning is fun too, but bluffing people and value betting thin, even if you win less, is actually more fun to me. Because you're sort of creating a feeling in your opponent. This is an interesting sizing here. Extremely interesting sizing for Jungleman because he's basically using a bunch of different sizings post flop on some of these like lower. I'm not saying like disconnected and this low kind of board, but like you do wonder if he's taking this sizing, then how is he going to be playing some of his other hands? Anyways, we don't have that much info. I really just want to freaking go through this entire match. He gets a call and he goes with the turn check. So if he had a bluff, right? There's a lot of deuce X that can just fold, right? This is a limped pot, and OTB is going to have an incredible amount of deuce X, 4X, even 3X, even random shit like Jack 6 can check all. So if Wookiees really had a bluff here, this is a pretty advantageous card to bluff because he's also going to end up turning a bunch of 10X. He's also going to continue to have a lot of equity with like a 3, with a 6. He'll have like 5X that can barrel. He'll have like some of these slow played hands like sixes to aces, depending on if he's even slow playing them at all. He might just never fucking slow play. He might not use an RNG. He might just say, fuck it, I'm like limping weak, and what are you going to do about it? Like raise me. I don't really know how he's playing. Or maybe he's being very tricky and he's actually limping a bunch, but I kind of doubt it. But yeah. And OTB goes like 1/3 pot? Like, what the fuck are you saying you have? But you're just telling me you have like 10-3 or something? Like you're a nit. Like, come on, you're just bluffing. Obviously, like you just have some random busted hands. Yeah, you just are bluffing. Why would you bluff A7 too? That is fucking terrible. That is not a good hand from OTB Red Baron. That is honestly a terrible hand. You should not be bluffing that hand. And also, you're just not repping shit. Basically, I don't think he's a heads-up player. I'm not trying to be insulting, but that is a terribly played hand because your hand just has a very easy check and then call. And if you're going 1/3, like, do you think you look like, what the fuck are you trying to accomplish? Do you think you're actually gonna be perceived to value bet like a 5, a 4? Like, what 8x do you have? It just makes no sense at all. I'm not trying to be insulting. I really love OTB Red Baron. I've always looked up to him, but I'm just saying this is a terrible hand, obviously. But he can, obviously, if you're playing like a shit ton of tables and you're a 6 max player and you're not a heads up player, you might just not know what's going on. Another thing as well here is that Jungle checks the turn with King 5, and this is very important, extremely important, because you can be a player that has your sort of medium strong hand region on the turn is in position, and you can actually push it very hard and go for very thin value. And then you can also be the guy that's actually slowing down and checking it more. And this is absolutely crucial to being able to identify how your opponent thinks. And Jungle goes with the turn check, and it's not even like it's a 10 of clubs. It's a freaking 10 of diamonds, and he goes with the check. Okay? So he's telling us a lot about how he thinks. I bet he's way over bluffing this turn. Anyways, we're going to call this an episode. I love you guys. This is me, and goodbye.